For centuries, the world has been taught a false story about Africa. A story that claims the continent was poor, empty, and waiting to be civilized. But history tells a very different truth. Africa was not poor. Africa was rich. Its lands, its minerals, its people, and its trade routes were some of the most valuable resources on Earth. And the world knew it. Long before European ships ever touched African shores, researchers, navigators, and royal advisors had already calculated the continent's wealth. They studied its gold reserves, mapped its kingdoms, and analyzed its trade networks. They weren't looking for exploration. They were planning extraction. They were preparing to take everything. In the 14th century, long before European colonization, the West African Empire of Mali produced nearly half of the world's gold. One ruler, Mansa Musa, became so wealthy that when he traveled to Cairo in 1324, he spent so much gold that the currency value in Egypt collapsed for years. Modern economists estimate that his fortune, adjusted for inflation, would be worth over $400 billion today. This was the Africa that Europe encountered, a continent of gold-rich empires, stable trade networks, and powerful political systems. But instead of forming equal partnerships, European powers began quietly gathering data to understand the true scale of African wealth. By the 1400s, Portuguese sailors, funded by the House of Avis, were not simply exploring for glory. They carried detailed economic journals. These logs recorded where gold dust was traded, where ivory was abundant, and which coastal kingdoms held the strongest militaries. These journals were used to prepare Europe for one of the largest economic operations in human history, the extraction of African resources at an industrial scale. They calculated everything, including the value of a human being. When the transatlantic slave trade began in the late 1400s, it wasn't chaotic or unplanned. It was built like a multinational business. European economists priced African labor based on age, strength, and skills. But labor was only the beginning. Europe wanted the continent's minerals too. In the late 1800s, the richest diamond deposits in the world were discovered in South Africa. Cecil Rhodes, funded by British financiers, created laws specifically designed to push Africans off their land so his company could control the mines. By 1891, the British South Africa Company owned over 90% of the region's diamond output. Meanwhile, in the Congo Free State, King Leopold II of Belgium created what historians call one of the most profitable forced labor systems in world history. The Congo was rich in rubber, a material vital for the growing automobile and industrial markets. Leopold privatized an entire nation and used terror to extract rubber at record-breaking speeds. Historians estimate that between 1885 and 1908, over 10 million Congolese people died under his regime. Belgian companies earned modern equivalent profits of over $1.1 trillion from Congolese rubber and minerals. Yet today, the Congo remains one of the poorest nations in the world, despite having the world's largest cobalt reserves, minerals essential for modern smartphones and electric cars. To manage such massive extraction, Europeans needed to organize Africa's wealth in a way they could understand and control, so they created maps. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, European powers divided Africa into 50 countries without consulting a single African leader. Their lines did not follow cultures, languages, or tribes. They followed resource lines. They followed rivers rich with minerals, forests filled with rubber, and lands where gold veins ran close to the surface. This was not colonization for civilization. It was colonization for profit. During this period, British economists created what they called the dual mandate. In simple terms, it meant colonies should be managed so that Britain gained maximum economic value while the colony received the minimum cost of administration. In Nigeria, for example, Britain introduced taxes where none had existed before. These taxes forced Africans to earn money through low-paying colonial jobs, which fed the colonial economy rather than local communities. In Kenya, Africans were pushed off their most fertile lands so European settlers could create cash crop plantations. By 1930, Europeans, who made up less than 2% of the Kenyan population, owned over 80% of its fertile land. Meanwhile, in southern Africa, the British created pass laws, legal documents that controlled where Africans could travel or work. These laws ensured that mines and farms always had a cheap labor supply available. It was economic engineering disguised as administration. By the mid-20th century, Africa had supplied the world with diamonds, gold, rubber, ivory, timber, copper, cocoa, groundnuts, uranium, iron ore, and millions of hours of forced labor. Britain extracted an estimated $45 trillion from India alone, but Africa's total extraction is still being calculated. Some economists suggest the real value could exceed $150 trillion. Even after colonization ended, the extraction never truly stopped. It just changed form. When African countries became independent in the 1950s and 1960s, they inherited economic systems designed for foreign benefit. Many nations entered independence already in debt to the very countries that had exploited them. The new global financial system, led by institutions like the IMF and World Bank, offered loans that came with conditions. Nations were required to privatize industries, remove subsidies, and open their markets to foreign companies. These policies, known as structural adjustment programs, reduced government control and allowed multinational corporations to dominate African economies. Zambia, for example, was once one of the world's largest copper producers. But after implementing structural adjustment in the 1990s, over 80% of its copper industry ended up under foreign ownership. The revenue that once stayed inside the country now flows outward. Even today, the pattern continues. The Congo supplies over 70% of the world's cobalt, essential for electric cars and lithium batteries. Yet the majority of cobalt mines are owned or financed by companies from China, the US, or Europe. In Guinea, the world's largest bauxite deposits are controlled by foreign mining giants. In Nigeria, oil revenues worth billions leave the country each year through tax loopholes, profit shifting, and offshore accounts. According to the UN, Africa loses over $88 billion every year in illicit financial flows, much of it through multinational corporations moving profits offshore. So how is Africa's wealth calculated? Through maps, surveys, journals, human valuations, and mineral audits. How is it stolen? Through slavery, colonization, forced labor, unfair laws, and unequal trade systems. How is it sold? Through global markets, corporate monopolies, commodity exchanges, and modern financial instruments that turn raw African resources into fortunes abroad. Yet despite all this, Africa remains one of the most resource-rich regions on Earth. It holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 60% of the world's arable land, and the youngest workforce on the planet. If you found this investigation valuable, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to Retro Finance Files. Your support helps reveal more hidden financial histories the world was never meant to see. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.